looks like. I mean, minus, like, I can't do anything.
Would you like me to sort of jump in?
Yeah, I guess so, until I get control of this. And go ahead and begin to record, because I was
Yep.
recording to my local. So
Recording is on. Well, for you all, I think what you can see is the screen that shows us the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council vision, which is a watershed where healthy streams support abundant native fish and other species. And I'll talk a little bit more during my program about the Watershed Council and our work. But essentially, our Watershed Council has been in existence since 2004. And our board still has several founding members on it. And they are very dedicated, as we all are here, to working on improving watershed health through active restoration of stream habitat and riparian habitat, removal of invasive species and planting of native species, and restoring native fish runs and other wildlife to the areas where we work. And I'll talk a little bit more about that again, as I said, during my presentation. But Derek, if you're still frozen, maybe I'll see if I can jump you here and take over control of the screen.
yeah, I'm trying to give you hosting rights again, but I can't even get it's so frozen. If I shut down my computer, is it going to shut down the entire Zoom?
I just reclaimed host.
Okay,
so,
good. All right, I'll be back in a tick.
Yep, no problem. And I've just admitted another person, so welcome this evening. Happy that you're here. And I'm Tom Gaskill. I am the presenter this evening, and our Derek Palmore, our Stewardship Involvement Coordinator, is running into some technical difficulties this evening. And so I'm going to, I guess, introduce myself here shortly. So let me start by just sharing a different screen with you here. I'm going to share my screen and go to presentation mode and pull this over here. And all right, very good. All right. Well, welcome all. Thank you for coming in tonight and joining us for this, which is our final Watershed Wealth webinar series entry. And I'm Tom Gaskill. I am the Executive Director for the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council, and I've been working in that position for about a year now. Very happily. I very much enjoy my work with the council and the people that I get to work with. And Derek introduced himself earlier. He is our Confluence AmeriCorps member that is working as our Stewardship Involvement Coordinator. And then, as I mentioned, Willow Michaels introduced herself quickly there too, but Willow is our Community Outreach Coordinator. And she's raising her hand there. Nice. I want to thank Derek and Willow for really doing a nice job in pulling together the Watershed Wealth webinar series, which is the first webinar series that our Watershed Council has ever hosted. And it hasn't been entirely without challenges, but I think we've surmounted many of those challenges. And so tonight, no, just true to form, Derek has had some technical challenges, but his part of the show is done and mine is just beginning. So tonight's presentation is called A Birder's Quest to Oregon City and Nearby. And what I'd like to share with you is a little bit about how I got involved in birding, and then also share with you what kinds of birds I think are very viable to see in the area that is Oregon City, determined Oregon City, and the area nearby. And as I do this, what I want to impart to you is enthusiasm for birding. Birding is probably one of the most accessible ways to watch wildlife. It contributes a tremendous amount, I think, to our personal well-being. And it is also a way for us to really engage with the natural world that is ever-changing, very exciting. And it also allows us to kind of gain some skills that we might not otherwise employ. And ironically, here we are staring at screens, computer screens, and interacting in this way. But I can tell you there is nothing so powerful as being out in nature and seeing a wild bird or a bird that you did not anticipate seeing, and trying to figure out what it is and why it's there, and open up a whole suite of questions around what birds are about. So tonight, what I'd like to do is really encourage you to engage in your own discovery of the amazing world of birds, as I have. And I will say the mode that I am using tonight is I'm going to share photos of birds that I took. I encourage, if you are interested in learning about birds, there are some basic tools, and I'll introduce those towards the end of the presentation. But birding photography, don't be intimidated by the incredibly remarkable photos that are out there of birds, because there are people who have equipment that costs thousands and thousands of dollars and take these beautiful photos of birds. But even with equipment that doesn't cost thousands, maybe $100, you can get some pretty sweet pictures of birds. And if they're for no one other than you, or maybe sharing with your friends, they're still very, very valuable. All right, so where do we start this journey? And I'm going to talk here for about 25 minutes is my goal, and then open it up for questions at the end. So please, if you do have questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and then we'll pick them up here at the end, and we can jump back and forth in the presentation to the photos or the slides that the question pertains to. And then we'll delve into that. So, and I really do encourage you to ask those questions if you have them. I absolutely love thinking about the questions that you have to offer. So, all right. So Birders Quest, Oregon City and nearby. So we're going to advance here, right? There we go. We're going to start out thinking about geography and habitat. And the term habitat and the word habitat, you're going to hear a lot during the presentation. As a biologist, habitat is so critical to whatever wildlife, whatever organism it is that we are trying to understand. And, you can think of habitat as being the space. It can be the construction of that space. So it's the plants, the rocks, the surroundings, and habitat is water, and it is food, and it is also that opportunity for that organism to reproduce and to exist and to be able to dwell. And so again, kind of back to space. So in terms of geography and habitat in the area around Oregon City, it's a fascinating place because we're in the Willamette Valley here, and we are at a place where the Willamette Valley was carved by a massive flood at the end of the last ice age, the Missoula floods, series of floods. And it created, I'm not going to go deeply into the geography, but it scoured some volcanic deposits from Mount Hood, and those basalts created a gorge really in the Willamette area, in this area. And this is Willamette Falls, if you know that. And then we have the Willamette River feeding up this way. And it's hard to see from this particular map, which is kind of Google Maps, and it makes everything flat. But the area that I'm focusing on is Oregon City and nearby. So, West Lynn is fair game. This area over here in the Willamette where Gladstone, Jennings Lodge are showing on this map. Kanema Bluff Nature Park, we're going to talk about that. This big plateau that we've got kind of around Beaver Creek and that area. And then up this way and all the way over into the Clackamas drainage. So Milo MacGyver State Park over here in Eagle Creek. We won't focus too much on that, but I'm going to jump ahead and just show you an area of interest to us as the Watershed Council. So this overlay is showing us the watersheds that our council works with, and Abernathy Creek watershed, Parrot Creek and Beaver Creek watershed, and then these little frontal watersheds that feed down directly into the Willamette, both above Willamette Falls and below Willamette Falls. So Abernathy Creek enters down here below Willamette Falls, and Beaver and Parrot Creek feed in up here. It's actually a little bit harder to see. Let me go to the next map, and you can see it a little bit better up here at New Era. So again, geography and habitat. What kinds of habitat should we expect in this environment? Well, this area is particularly diverse in that we have oak savanna, remnants of oak savanna. We have Douglas fir forests with understories of big leaf maple and all kinds of species in there. And then we also have these open grassland areas around the savannas, and then the wetland areas associated with the Willamette River and with these creek systems. So again, Beaver and Parrot Creek here, and Abernathy Creek here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about habitat as we go on in this, and we're going to start to look at birds. And as I show those birds, what I'm going to try to help you to appreciate is weaving in the habitat that we might see those types of birds in and the time of year. So very, very important as we think about birds. Let's zoom out a little bit and get a bigger picture. All right. So in terms of Oregon, what drew me to Oregon back in 1989 when I first landed here after receiving my bachelor's degree in biology back east in New England was the remarkable nature of a state that pretty much had every habitat type that I could think of, short of like island habitats out in Hawaii, and that had some just amazing habitat types. And we've got this coastal edge here, and of course the Pacific Ocean, which influences all of our weather that we experience here in the Pacific Northwest, and for that matter on the continent of North America. And I landed down in Coos Bay, and actually just to the south down here in Charleston. And so really some of the first birding that I did in Oregon, I did on the coast. And I did that for a sum total of 26 years. And so I was heavily influenced by that coast. But what I want to point out here are a couple of important features. One is, this extensive rocky coastline, really, with some pretty small estuaries where rivers meet the ocean. So Coos Bay is the largest estuary on the Oregon coast, minus the Columbia River estuary, which is up here. And then Tillamook Bay and some other bays down along the coast. But then the Willamette Trough, or the Willamette Valley, which sits down in the foothills of the Cascade Range. And then to the east, these drier environments. So the area around Portland really sits at the mouth of this Willamette Trough, where the Willamette River flows into the Columbia. And so that creates some kind of fun birding opportunities, because we've got the Pacific Flyway, which is the migratory pathway that is kind of invisible to the naked eye, but is extremely important to so many species that migrate north and south along this flyway. And so the Willamette Valley sits on that north-south axis, and we sit at a very nice option here for seeing mostly the inland migrators, not the seabirds. We don't really see seabirds so much. If we saw them in Portland, they would have to be blown off course by a pretty heavy storm. Or we might see them in the Columbia. All right. And then we're bounded on the east by the Cascade Range. And so as we go up in elevation, we can see different species there. And we're going to focus right in on this part of the Willamette Trough. I think the last thing that I want to say about that is in terms of, where we look for birds, when we look for birds, it's important to think about where you are at in relation to these great big geologic features. So we've got the Cascades, the high Cascades here. We've got this trough. We've got this coastal range of mountains, and then we've got the coast itself. And then we've got water bodies within there, down here, Fern Ridge. All right. So birds and birding. How did I get into birding? I started watching birds really in earnest when I had moved. I grew up in Illinois, in Chicago, just outside of Chicago. And I never really paid a huge amount of attention to birds. But I moved to New Hampshire to get my undergraduate degree, and my brother called my attention to birds, my older brother, and really got me kind of interested in learning more about them. In my degree in biology, as I pursued that, I started to become fascinated. And as I came west, I started to realize, wow, there are some incredible birds in this world. And a lot of the common birds here are extraordinarily beautiful and interesting. And tonight, the mode that you will experience this presentation in is that I'll show you a photo of a bird like this, and then I'll show you a duplicate slide with the name of the bird. And we can, sort of play games. I thought about trying to make this a little more interactive, but I think what I'm going to do is let it be interactive for you in your own space here tonight. And so if you see a bird photo like this, see if you can think of what the name of that bird is, and feel free to cheat. If you want to cheat and you've got a bird book handy and you want to look at that, or you want to look at your birding app, you go for it. But this bird, I'm going to go ahead and reveal. I think I'm going to go ahead and reveal, if my slide will advance. There we go. Is spotted towhee. And spotted towhee is actually a sparrow. It's related to the sparrows. So sparrows can be confounding birds to try and identify, but spotted towhee is a pretty easy one because there's these beautiful bright red sides to it. And in fact, used to be called, when I first started studying this bird, rufous-sided towhee. But the spots back here, these white spots on the underside of the tail, are actually what the common name became. Common names are a little bit tricky, and I've left out the scientific names tonight because this is meant to be kind of a celebration and an introduction to birds. So I don't pretend to, I'm not an ornithologist. I don't pretend to be. I do enjoy the scientific names, and they can tell us a lot about the bird, but I also just enjoy the birds. So spotted towhee, and beautiful red eye here. This heavy bill is a good feature for us to look for, and the red eye, and then this very distinctive black head. But these rufous sides are also helpful, and it's a perching bird. And so we can see that with these claws, 1 back and 3 up front. All right. So here are some other common species found around town. And I want to, again, these are photos that I took. So I want to encourage you, don't be afraid, get that camera out there, take some photos and enjoy them. And sometimes those photos will help you to identify a bird after the fact. So, and I want to give a plug here for common birds around town. We tend to believe that if it's common, well, then it's kind of boring. Maybe as birders, we think that, well, that's kind of boring. And I guess I'd give a plug for really watching the behavior of common birds, because the common birds, for one thing, they aren't necessarily always common. Sometimes it's a seasonal thing. And sometimes these birds that are common are only common in certain habitats. In fact, Derek and I were just talking about spotted towhees, and he was saying how they really aren't in the neighborhood where he lives. And yet spotted towhees are extremely common in the area where I live. You know, what makes them common? What makes them common, we're back to habitat. And habitat, in this case, we've got three different characters here. So up in this corner, we've got this, I'll give you, it's a sparrow, if you're still kind of guessing, and you'll probably know the names of all these. But sparrows tend to like brushy habitat. Sparrows tend to be really comfortable with the invasive Himalayan blackberry that is predominant throughout the Pacific Northwest. It is often a hedge. And if you watch that hedge and you watch this sparrow or sparrows like it, you really want to key into some features on these sparrows. The bill shape, that sort of pointed but not super sharp and fairly short bill shape, the color of the head and the feathers on the head, and then the color of the breast, and sometimes the color of the tail. So that's a helpful one for this sparrow. We'll talk about the name in a minute. And then this is a common bird. And actually, I'm gonna jump forward to names. So you know, song sparrow maybe. Song sparrow may not be the most impressive creature in terms of its looks, but it has an absolutely beautiful voice, hence the common name. So in song sparrows, song can be very diverse. So depending on where the song sparrow lives in North America, its call and song can be quite different. So I'd encourage you as a birder, you know, if you get out there, start out by quieting yourself down and listening. And when you listen, see if you can identify that call and then see that bird making that call. So this song sparrow here is definitely in song mode. And from that, it should give us some good clues. Down here, we have American robin. And American robin, again, you know, a bird that people might say, oh, you know, robin, about as common as you could get, boring. But robins are pretty fascinating creatures because they are resident here and they are also migratory. So robins pass through here in big flocks that are not necessarily resident. And as they pass through, they're exploiting habitat. So north to south, as the seasons change, that habitat presents feeding opportunity for those animals. And as migrators move through different areas, they need fuel for their journey or their migration. And so keep your eyes open for robins that appear in large flocks. And this white eye ring here, and I would say this is probably a resident robin, but the white eye ring can be a good clue for us that this may be a part of this. I know this was an individual rather than in a flock, but when we see these flocks passing through, they're moving up into Canada and into Alaska, where they will exploit nesting habitat to lay their eggs, to create nests, lay their eggs, rear their young, and then they'll move back southward as the conditions get rougher there. All right, and here's one that is a year-round resident for us, and this is Steller's jay. And Steller's jay kind of gets the rough call. Jays and crows and magpies are part of a group of birds called corvids, and the corvids are tough. They are generalists, so they can deal with highly impacted habitat. And as generalists, they also are fairly tolerant of disturbance. So human beings don't particularly bother Steller's jay. In fact, they'll look for opportunity around human dwellings to take advantage of the habitat that we've disturbed and to see what kind of food they can get. That said, they are pretty secretive nesters. I've never seen a Steller's jay nest. They are also fairly aggressive towards other birds. All the corvids are. And I have seen Steller's jays commit some pretty heinous attacks on smaller birds. And I'm checking my time here. I'm going to keep rolling along pretty good. All right. I do have a few repeat birds in here, and I do that because I like to show and let you test your knowledge. Is that a bird that I now recognize that was named earlier on? So I will be passing that along. This is spotted towhee up in the corner again. So you've already been given that name, and we've got those same key features: the red eye, the black head, this very heavy, thick bill, and the red sides. And we can't see the spotted tail here. This character down here is probably one of the most popular birds when people get into birding, or at least for a certain group of birders, and that is the hummingbirds. And hummingbirds are truly remarkable. I'm not going to go into great depth here about all the wonderful biology of hummingbirds. But these birds can be attracted to feeders, but they can also be attracted to your yard by those first blooms of the year. And they are highly specialized. You can see this very long, narrow bill, and inside there is a tongue that recoils, and that long, narrow tongue will come out through that bill. And they are not only looking for nectar, but they are looking for insects. So they are insectivores, and I've actually seen them hunt just the insect and not worry about the flowers so much. And we'll talk about the name of that particular hummingbird here in a second. We'll pull it up. And then there's this character up here. And woodpeckers, and I'll talk at the latter part of this talk about the importance of woodpeckers. But woodpeckers like this one are often detected by sound. And the sound that this woodpecker makes is a very high-pitched squeak. Almost sounds like a squeaky toy if you were to squeak a toy for a dog or something. But when you hear that, look up, track the trunk of a tree, look for a dead tree preferably, or a dying tree. And, of course, there's the familiar peck, peck, pecking of a woodpecker that also draws our attention to them. So I didn't name the rufous or the spotted towhee up here, but this is Anna's hummingbird. And it's the most common hummingbird that we have around here. They make these beautiful parabolic dives. Right now, the males are attempting to attract mates and also to define territory. And their gorget, which is this part right here, I have a slide later on where we'll see that in its bright pink plumage. But the green back and the greenish breast of this bird tells us this is Anna's hummingbird. Now, there is another related hummingbird called Allen's hummingbird that is very close in some ways in coloration, but has a much more rufous color to it. And then downy woodpecker. Downy and hairy can be hard to tell apart. Downies are smaller than hairies, but very, very similar in look. And in fact, if you can just say it is a downy or a hairy woodpecker, feel good about that. So they're not simple to tell apart. All right. Now we're going to jump on. These are some other common species found around town. I'm really concentrating on the common species because, honestly, once you get familiar with the commons, you're going to start to notice the one that's not common, and that leads you into these more challenging to identify, perhaps, or less frequent species. So up here's another jay, another member of the corvid family. Notice no crest on this jay. This is a decent picture of it, but this is actually an absolutely beautiful jay when you see it in the wild. Jays are very inquisitive, and you can see from the tilt of the head on this bird, it's looking for something, perhaps an insect that it thinks might be crawling along here that it's going to feed on. Or maybe it's just noticed, something down on the ground that it's going to investigate next. So jays, again, gregarious. They tend to be easy to detect. They can be difficult to see sometimes. They'll talk a lot, but they will hide pretty close. But scrub jay, sorry, and now I've given away the name, but this particular bird, it does not like the deep forest. It's looking for you. This is a bird you'd find in the oak savanna. This is a bird that you would find in disturbed habitat, but not heavily disturbed habitat. So you might find this in your backyard, but chances are if there weren't enough trees around, if there weren't enough good sized native bushes around, not so much. This character down here often shows up in flocks. In this particular instance, it was not, it was solitary, and I'll show you why here a little later on. This is a bird that often appears in flocks, almost fairy-like. It arrives, it will feed very quickly, it stays together with its group when it is in a flock, and will move on very rapidly. And often it is seen with other birds like chestnut-backed chickadee, black-capped chickadee. It can be, they call them guilds of birds, and it can move within that guild of small, fast-moving, rapidly feeding insectivorous birds. This one up here is another woodpecker. Notice the nice red mustache, brown cap to it, and this black on the breast, and then the spotting all over the breast. And this particular one is perched on a tree, but this is a woodpecker that we could expect to see on the ground. Most woodpeckers are not happy on the ground. It's not where they belong or do their work. But this particular one is, and I'm going to jump to the names. So this is northern flicker. And northern flicker is actually a part of a group of birds that they used to be called red-shafted flicker and yellow-shafted flicker, and then they intergradate, and that's based on their diet. And depending on where you're at in North America, the dominant species will be that red-shafted or that yellow-shafted or that intergradation. And then there are other flickers that are closely related, or there's another flicker that's closely related. But northern flicker is a good bird to see around, and makes a very, some people describe it as a plunger sound, a bird sound to it. I'm not going to make a lot of bird calls for you tonight. There are a lot of good bird song apps out there, and you can hear those, and you can actually hear what the bird sounds like instead of my interpretation. But and then bush tit. This is the one that these are kind of the fairies of the forest for me, forest and the meadow. Bush tits are actually not found in deep forest typically. They're more out in the edge habitats, and then California scrub jay up there in the left. All right, so now we get to a little bit trickier species. These are birds that you can definitely see or detect, but you may have a little bit of trouble. And I'm going to start with this one right in here, perched on this branch. There was a fellow birder who she would refer to these as LBJs when she couldn't identify them, little brown jobs. And this little brown job has this very nice white eye stripe here, which helps us, and has kind of a rough call to it. Is seen near water, although in this particular habitat, it's not necessarily near water. It's in a hawthorn. This bird up here, you can see the yellow throat, little tinge of yellow under the wing, maybe a little tinge of yellow back here, but it doesn't give us any great, and then this white eye ring. But as you explore birds with this shaped bill and about this size, you're going to find that this yellow and this gray and this white, maybe a little bit of streaking, starts to be pretty common. And it can be very irritating when you're trying to figure out what that bird is. So, this is where a photo can sometimes come in handy, because you can zoom in, no matter how grainy the photo is, you can zoom in and start to get some key features on it. And then this bird right here is fairly happy in the canopy. And the canopy can be, 20, 30 feet above your head. And so there's a reason why birders are often, staring up into the upper reaches of the tree, and the canopy is they're trying to figure out what's going on up there. And this is where good optics really help. So I'm going to go ahead and reveal and keep moving along here on these. So Up here, I'm going to start with yellow-rumped warbler. And you could say, well, Tom, where's the yellow rump? It's right there. It's covered by the wings. Yellow-rumped warbler, it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of work, but generally, if you can keep working with the bird, in other words, you detect the bird, so you may hear the call, and now you can get your binoculars. I'm just going to pull, I've brought some binoculars tonight just to show you, and I'll talk about these in a bit. You really start to work with the bird. So you start to figure out, where is that bird? See if you can get that dialed in, as they call it. So get it in focus and spend your time. And a very good birder that I know from Coos Bay gave me a piece of advice once a long ago, which I really appreciate, which is when you see the bird, keep looking at the bird and don't worry about the field guide. Focus on the key features. What does the size of the bird, can you get a gauge on the size of the bird? Shape of bill, the eye, what's special, anything special about the eye? What's special about the bird? What strikes you about it? Yellow markings. You'd be amazed how much you retain when you really focus on that bird. Then look at the field guide once the bird is gone or moved on, unless you're reasonably confident it's going to stay there. Black-throated gray warbler. This is another one that really takes some work because they're a fairly secretive bird. Compared to a crow or a jay, they are not gregarious. They're gregarious in their way, but they're way up in the canopy, and they're going to take some work to identify. So black-throated gray has a pretty identifiable head color to it. And this, I actually was able to put together calls of black-throated grays with sightings of these birds, songs rather. And so that's kind of enjoyable too. That's a real positive feeling, is when you've seen that bird, you've watched it for a while, and now you've got that song pieced together with that bird because you saw the bird singing the song. Very exciting. And then here's Bewick's wren. And Bewick's wren is a good one to watch for in the understory, in the low brush. And they are also, wrens tend to be pretty secretive. They are, and this is because, for good reason, they're ground nesters. So wrens aren't very interested in you knowing where they are at. They need to be able to attract a mate. So the males will sing from a perch. But once they've sung, or if they feel like they've been noted, they're going to get back to ground. They're going to go to ground, so to speak, and they really do not want to be seen, and they do not want to be discovered by predators. All right. So a few showy species. I'm going to move along. So up here, notice the black cap, again, the bright yellow, but distinctive from our yellow-rumped warbler. Very heavy bill on this, triangular bill. So this puts us with the finches. And as a finch, this one is one of two different species that we might see here. We'll come back to that in a second. Here's another bird with that heavy bill, but this heavy bill is a little bit different in shape, certainly different in presentation, and this blue head is outstanding, just a gorgeous color. Photo doesn't do it justice. The blue rump, and then if it were turned around, we'd see this nice kind of orangey rust color on the back, but we would also see a beautiful rusty color on the breast. And then over here, another one of our woodpeckers that's a very distinctive type of woodpecker in the feeding habits for it. And I don't know if you can see these little hairs on here, but these little bristles, and I'm sorry, the name is escaping me. I should have, rictal hairs is what they're called. And there is some uncertainty about what the rictal hairs are for exactly. But one of the thoughts of scientists is that these rictal hairs actually help this bird to get the insects closer to the business end of that beak, the feeding end right there. And so this is nice, and again, it's not a perfect photo. It's out of focus, frankly. It's a little rough. The bird was moving, but it gives me that chance to really appreciate form and function of this bird. So who do we have here? We have lesser goldfinch. The American goldfinch is another goldfinch that we can find commonly in the area here. Lesser goldfinch, the males have this very distinctive cap. I could spend a lot more time talking to you about male versus female, and trying to identify females is often challenging when it comes to birds like goldfinch, because the females look like a lot of other female birds in the finches that have that similar cast, but the males have this distinctive black cap, so that's helpful for us. Lazuli bunting. So this is one of probably the showiest birds I think I've ever seen here out west. And lazuli bunting is a bird that likes, again, that oak savanna kind of habitat. Lesser goldfinch, they will take to urban yards. They're very happy in apple trees, but they also love conifer forests. But when you see them in conifer forests, they're often way up high. But they will come down low as well. So you don't have to strain your eyes and your neck to see them. And then red-breasted sapsucker, very fascinating bird in their feeding habits. And so I'm going to show some examples of the remnants of that. But essentially, sapsuckers are one of the more efficient feeders, because what they do is they create these holes, and I'll show you the habitat later on in the show. And then they feed initially off the sap of the tree, hence the name sapsucker. But then they also go back to those same holes, and insects will have been attracted to the sap of the tree. They get stuck in that sap, and the sapsucker feeds on them and gets a nice protein treat, a little snack bar. All right. And the show goes on. So here are three, again, very dramatic and attractive birds that we might see in the Oregon City area or vicinity. Up here, you notice, again, this very heavy bill on this one, which will give us a key to its name. It's even heavier than our lazuli bunting. Down here, we have an attractive, these are migratory birds, by the way. So these are ones that we would only expect to see really from this point forward into the late autumn, and then they head out. So in this case, on a burn, an old burn area, but this is a bird that dwells in treetops, and often detected by its song, because it can be hard to see if it's high up in the canopy, but beautiful contrasty, orange on the head, yellow on the breast. Again, this is a male. The females have similar look to other females with yellow breast and yellow body, and then they have a yellow head. So it can be a little bit trickier to identify male to female, and you can see it's feeding on an insect right there. Its tongue, it's just dipped in, and actually I kind of wondered with this photo whether it got something stuck on its mandible, upper mandible. And then this one you probably recognize just by its lovely color, but the blue on the back and the orange breast are very identifiable to us. And this is, again, a male. And the oak leaves here tell you this is an oak savanna species. All right, so here we have black-headed grosbeak. Grosbeak, great big heavy beak. So this is a good identifier. And these have a song. If you know the song of the robin, the grosbeak has a very high-speed robin-like song to it. So that's a good way to detect grosbeak. They love the upper branches of cottonwoods, but they will come down, obviously, to drink. So this was along the water's edge. But you can also hear them singing high up in the cottonwood canopy. Western tanager loves Douglas fir. They will pick seeds out of Douglas fir cones, and they tend to be up in the canopy, but I've also seen them in oak savanna habitat as well. And then Western bluebird. And Western bluebird take readily to nest boxes, so people will sometimes have success with the Western bluebird nest box. All right, and I'm going to keep rolling along. Got about 10 minutes left here. So all year long, I put this slide in here to say, don't think that birding is just a summer event, not by a long shot. Birding is something that you can do year round. And in fact, it's fascinating to watch the changes in bird life year round. As birds tend to either migrate, or even if they are simply moving in an area due to weather patterns or this kind of thing, sometimes we will see birds in an area that we did not expect to see. And this particular one up here is a thrush, a type of thrush, so related to robins and hermit thrushes and Swainson's thrush. But this particular thrush is one that we would expect to see in the winter, not in the summer. And that's because they vertically migrate up in elevation as well as heading north. And so we can hear their lovely call up in the Cascade Mountains. We don't tend to hear their call, their song rather, down here, or their call down here in the winter much, but we definitely see them in the winter when they come down, when the snows fall. This bird down here has an obvious and rather bizarre adaptation in the bill, and that is not some kind of mutation, although it probably began as somewhat of a mutation, but this particular bird is highly adapted and highly adept at removing seeds from cones of conifer trees. And we'll get into a little more detail there in just a moment when I name the bird. But this is one that you would want to look for up in the tops of trees. Song is a good song to learn on this bird, and flight pattern is good. They tend to, as they fly in a flock, they do this kind of up-down movement where the flock is, it's not all flying consistently, but it's moving kind of up, down, up, down, up, down, the individuals. And then again, you probably know this one now. There's a second photo from that series of Anna's hummingbird. So we'll go to names now. So red crossbill over here, red crossbill. And the female on this is actually yellow, but the crossbill allows these birds to get into those seed cone bracts, or the covers for the seed, and take that protein of the seed out of that cone. And this is a bird that when they appear in abundance, it's called an eruption. And that eruption, not eruption, but eruption, means that red crossbills can be here in the hundreds. Flocks of 100 or more are not uncommon. And they will move from tree to tree. And you want to look for cone-bearing trees that are thick with cones in a good cone year. And red crossbills are a good bird to see there. And then varied thrush. Varied thrush will definitely come to your feeders in winter. You can actually see this was some remnant bird seed that I had when I took this photo. But varied thrush has an absolutely gorgeous call and song rather. And if you hear it up in the mountains, you'll never forget it. But varied thrush. And then Anna's hummingbird, again, just kind of a showy photo there. Still not the great jet. So what about water birds? All right, well, I'm a bit of a water bird myself. I love kayaking and I love water birds. I had to really refrain from putting a lot of coastal birds into this show because the geographic area that I focused on is Oregon City and the surroundings. So I thought I'd highlight two very different birds here for water birds, even though there are an abundance of water birds around Oregon City. And I'm going to start, I think, with this very cryptic character right here. And if you don't know this bird, this is a fun bird to learn. This is an aquatic songbird. And all right. I just saw a little fun chat there. So the aquatic songbird, this is the only North American aquatic songbird. And I threw these three photos in there because here it is perched on a rock in a fairly rapidly moving creek. This is out at Milo MacGyver. And here it is then on that rock, turned around the other way and then flipped back with its face down in the water. And that wasn't the end of the show for this bird, because the next thing that this bird does is it actually steps down into the bottom of the creek, and the water is flowing over it. And this bird is hunting for those macroinvertebrates, those little tasty morsels that the same things salmon like to eat, young salmon, and lots of fish will look for those macroinvertebrates. But these are water insects, aquatic insects, essentially. And this bird hunts those. This character over here has a different habit entirely. Sits on the surface of the water and dives below, is very effective underwater. It has these nictitating membranes, so it can see underneath the water. It has this bill that is got razor sharp teeth lining both sides of it, and it can grab fish and pull them into its bill and into its gullet. So who are these? And then of course, here's this goofy bird up here. Whoops, I went the wrong way. Sorry about that. There we are. So this is the ouzel. And ouzels are an aquatic songbird, just a really fun bird to watch. And then hooded merganser. And I want to highlight hooded merganser just to say that Abernathy Creek, one of the watersheds that we work in, Derek and Willow and I were out with our chair of our board, Doug Neely, and got to see a hooded merganser along Abernathy Creek near a restoration site that we're working on. These are a cavity nesting duck. So these are a bird that expects a big, old, dying, decaying tree in order to be able to provide a nest for its young. So hooded mergansers. All right. I'm going to jump now to technique a little bit, and I've still got a little ways to go. And so I'm sorry, I'm running late, and I knew I would do this, so I'm going to speed up. Thoughtful birder, birding etiquette. So these are some basic rules. Keep your distance. Eyes, ears, and optics are the thing. I mentioned optics. I like an 8x42 set of binoculars. If you go, so 8 is the power, 8 times the magnification, and then 42 is the distance in millimeters across the lens, and that allows for light gathering capability. And to me, 8x42 is a nice balance. You can get higher magnification binoculars, but it can be hard to hold them still in your hands. And so I use these to aid my eyes. Optics can be your camera. Optics can be spotting scopes. And they make some absolutely beautiful optics, and you can spend a tremendous amount of money on them. But you know, if you're going to spend a little bit of money in birding, don't skimp too much on the optics, because good binoculars will make a difference. Respect private property, absolutely. Breeding season, which is right now, means nests. So you want to keep a distance. The photo on the right here, this was actually taken from quite a distance, and it was through a spotting scope. So that's why it's fairly large. And then quiet listening is best. You know, if you are talking a lot of birds will tolerate that. Some won't. But it makes for a more pleasant experience if you're really listening. And if your mouth is shut, you can be listening. So we've got bush tits, and we've got a yellow-rumped warbler on the nest, which is a really exciting thing. And these are actually fledgling bush tits. And I felt very privileged to see this, because these little characters were just hanging out and kind of figuring out the new day. They're new to the world, and they're like little kids in some ways. All right. So resources for the journey. I mentioned binoculars, spotting scope, camera, field guide, apps. So if you have a smartphone, there are a tremendous number of free apps out there. One of the great apps for an introduction to birding is the Merlin app. I didn't take a picture of that one in particular for the screen here, but the Merlin app, if you look it up, it is Cornell Lab of Ornithology's freebie, and they will actually help you identify song as well. So I really recommend that. And I'm going to talk about some other apps here in a minute, but of course, this is a great blue heron, and great blue heron are a lovely water bird that we do see in the area. So resources for Journey apps. So I highlighted a couple here. This is the free Audubon app. It's a very nice, easy to use, in my opinion, app for identifying birds. You can add your sightings to this. You know, if you're like me and you've done any birding at all, you probably have your sightings listed in about 25 or 30 different places, including handwritten books, scrawled on the back of napkins, and then in your apps as well. And maybe in your journal notes. But this app over here, which is called eBird, is right down here, ebird.org, is one that I really recommend if you want to track your progress as you're collecting data. So you can select your start time and just you click on the button there. My screen blocks it, start checklist, and it'll start recording your track if you like, if you use the traveling protocol. And then as you identify a bird, you can just search and you say, great, I've got Anna's hummingbirds or Anna's hummingbird. And then you add it, and then you can click on it, whoops, and you can add more Anna's hummingbirds as you see them, or in this case, like I had 13 black-capped chickadees. So I just kept adding those as I went along. I will caution, if you see a rare or an infrequently seen bird like this northern goshawk that I saw, be prepared in eBird to hear from an expert asking you for field markings, details, and preferably digital photographs. You know, there are people who are heavily into birding that are really have a high level of expertise, tremendous skills and optics and all. And they just want to make sure that this data is accurate. And so I really appreciate that, but it can be a little intimidating the first time you get called out on an identification that you've made, but please don't let it trip you up. Just keep going because it's wonderful to learn. All right, so places to go birding. We're almost through it here. So Kanema Bluff is my top number one. I had a lovely field trip here. This is a view of Kanema Bluff Nature Park, which is a metro natural area. They do not allow dogs, so you should be aware of that before you go. I would plan for a minimum of an hour here. I took 3 hours and collected that list that you just saw. These are some other places to go birding in the area. Clackamas Park right down on the Willamette. The John Inskeep Environmental Learning Center up at the Clackamas Community College campus right there in Oregon City has some excellent habitat and some really interesting birds. Newell Creek Canyon Nature Park, I would also recommend, newly opened. A lot of fun forest habitat in there, some wetland habitat down at the lower end along the Newell Creek. And then Milo MacGyver State Park, you could spend a day there easily. There's all kinds of habitats, different types of habitats, several trails that connect up, and you can wear yourself out. McLaughlin Prom, which I wanted to call Promenade, but it actually shows on maps as McLaughlin Prom. It overlooks the Willamette Gorge and Willamette Falls, and great place to look for bald eagles, peregrine falcon, turkey vultures, and other raptors. You know, the very common to see if you're seeing a raptor in flight, often a red-tailed hawk. And then Abernathy Creek Park, which is the site of a project that we're working on here with a nice little birding trail. But I've had some fun birding expeditions there. All right, so habitat, I was just going to touch on this briefly. Here are those holes from that red-breasted sapsucker. So kind of fun to see. And this is on the bark of, I believe, an ash tree. Here's the habitat at Kanema Bluff. And you can see there's a diverse, nice forest edge here and some restoring oak savanna. And then there's some deeper forest there. So try to pick a place where you can see several types of habitat and you'll see more diverse bird life. And then this little character, red-breasted nuthatches are most common, but in these oak savannas, white-breasted nuthatch is a good bird to look for. And I can just see that white on the face that tells me this is white-breasted nuthatch here. But I did watch this bird for quite a while. It just wasn't as cooperative with the photos. Can't say enough about pileated woodpecker, which is an architect of the forest. And these big standing dead trees are hugely important habitat. And we tend to, as humans, look at big dead trees and say trouble. But for wildlife, and particularly for something like pileated woodpecker or pileated woodpecker, that's the nest hole right there. This is very, very important to these species. And also creates habitat for many other species. Those nest holes, when they're abandoned by the pileated woodpecker, you're going to have other species coming in like squirrels, northern flying squirrels will use that habitat, voles will use that habitat, and other bird species like owls. The owls aren't the architects. It's the pileated woodpeckers and the other woodpeckers that are the real architects of making these condos for chickadees, black-capped and chestnut-backed chickadees, the nuthatches, all kinds of different cavity nesters. And of course, finally, just your part in future of birds, in the future of birds, this habitat is disappearing. One of the reasons that nest boxes are so popular is because we have very few snags around. And so we put up nest boxes to replicate the snags. But hey, let's see what we can do to increase the number of snags around. Nature's doing it. It's ice storms are doing it. And in places where it can happen, where it's not posing a safety risk to humans and into our habitat of our homes, if we can leave those dead trees standing, that's hugely important. What else can we do for the future of birds? This sad little fellow here, this golden crowned kinglet, was a window strike. And window strikes are a big problem. If you have big glass windows, birds don't see the glass, they just see the space, and they may try and fly through it. And if they hit it, it can be fatal. Fortunately for this little character, golden crowned kinglet, it was not fatally injured and was able to fly off. And then I included this lovely red flowering currant to remind us that we can provide habitat without necessarily providing the food in a bird feeder if we naturescape our landscapes, our yards. Red flowering currant will grow in all kinds of places, loves sunny, southern facing space. It's rapidly growing and it's a beautiful early spring flower. Hummingbirds love it. All kinds of birds will be attracted to it. And then, of course, the American bald eagle is one that you can look for around Oregon City. All right, well, that's my talk for tonight. And I am sorry, I kept you a little bit longer than I intended to. If you do have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. Or, you can also open up your microphone, or if you know how to use the raise hand function, you can do that. But that's what I have for you tonight. So Derek, I don't know if you want to, are you with us?
Yep. Thanks, Tom.
Sure. All right.
I mean, I'm with you, frequently, and I hear stuff about birds all the time, and I'm still grabbing stuff from you just through this. So this is awesome.
Well, good. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation this evening, folks. And if you don't have any questions, that just means that I answered them all for you. So, right. Hi, Alexis. How are you? All right.
I'm good, thanks. Thank you, Tom.
Sure. Yeah. Welcome.
What's your favorite bird?
Oh, I love it. That's funny. We were talking about this beforehand, and
I know the answer.
Yeah, Derek knows my answer. Is I have the glib answer, which is the bird that's in front of me. That's my favorite bird. But the more nuanced answer, I guess I would say, is it depends on the habitat. A few favorite birds of mine. Bush tit is actually one of my favorite birds. I think they're just so wonderful to watch, and when they appear, it really is like suddenly a flock of fairies has just shown up around you, and they can disappear as quickly. And they have this remarkable strategy. So they're a small bird, which means they've got to watch out for themselves, but they're also a very gregarious bird, which means they're around and other birds know they're around, and they have to be because they're insectivores. And so when they nest, they create this sack-like nest. And it's really something to see. They take little bits of moss and duff, and they weave it into this sack-like nest. And that's where they lay their eggs way down in the bottom of it, but they're smart. They create a false nest too. And so they confuse their predators. Things like Steller's jays will absolutely go after that nest, but they will mistake. And, depending on what's going on, those bush tits will see, oh, okay, there's a predator working out, then I'm going to pick another spot to make my second nest. And yeah, very, very sharp. So that's one. And I've got about a dozen other, but I don't know who we got all night.
If you'd had the time to include the coastal water birds, which ones would you have put in?
Yeah, off the top, Harlequin duck is, I'll just jump to that one because that connects our watersheds and the watersheds up in the Cascades with the coast, right? So Harlequin ducks are one that overwinters on the coast. They're absolutely gorgeous, although somewhat clown-like, depends on what you determine as gorgeous. They have this cacophony of colors that show up. And then if you've ever watched a Harlequin duck up in a fast, fresh flowing river system up in the Cascades, they are able to move in these rapids where you would not imagine any duck would dare go. And they're hunting up there for fish. So, and then they move north up into Canada because the better habitat's there for them. So, and then oyster catcher, black oyster catcher is another favorite of mine. Just a chattery, sweet song on the coast, and fascinating to watch as they work along. Again, they're a danger bird. So they're going to go right into that area, that surf zone, where it's rocky shore and it's exposed. And the next thing that's going to happen is a big wave comes at them. And just before that wave breaks, they are up on the wing and moving to safer habitat. So yeah, they're fun. Yeah. Well, any other, I see there's some chat going on. Maybe I can multitask here and see if there's any questions in the chat. Just some thanks. Very good. Well, good. Well, I also just want to really encourage folks, if you are interested in getting out and doing some birding, we're going to have an event up at the Environmental Learning Center at Clackamas Community College here on June 25th, I believe it is. And
yeah, I put the dates in the chat.
Great, super. And we're doing a bio blitz as a part of that. And so I'm going to lead, at least be one of the leaders for birding on that day. And I expect if it's anything like what I hope to do, we won't necessarily just stay right there at the Environmental Learning Center, but we're going to hit some other spots too, because a lot of my experience with sort of blitzing on biology and wildlife comes from Audubon Christmas bird counts. And to me, there is nothing so satisfying as waking up before the first light on a winter morning for a Christmas bird count and then spending the entire day and coming in thoroughly exhausted, having documented as many different species and as many different individuals as you can. So I love doing that kind of thing, and maybe we'll pull something like that on June 25th.
You know what the timing is going to be for that?
Yeah, we're doing it.
Derek, yeah.
No, we'll have to leave. I believe we're going to try and do it from 8 to 1, maybe 8 to 2, and it's going to work in hour slots. And so each person, each expert, resident expert or guide can take up to 10, and we'll have 2 going at a time. So basically 20 people will be going out every hour. Meanwhile, we'll have other experts kind of at a stationary HQ kind of place that people, if they want to do things on their own, can do things on their own and then come back and talk to the residents just to double check. So yeah, it should be pretty cool. Will and I worked quite a bit with Renee last week to try and kind of sort out the timing and the logistics of it all, because yeah, Renee wants to get a lot of people up there, and we got some sponsorship, and so it sounds like the promotional parts are going to be a little more broad as far as
Cool.
our channels. So yeah,
That's
I'm
great.
excited.
You know, one of the goals too, Alexis, is there are so many nice apps now, iNaturalist and eBird and all these different modes for identifying and trying to help people get a little more comfortable with that. So, you know, my goal is not certainly as aggressive as trying to document absolutely every bird that I
Right.
see, every niche and nook and cranny, but really trying to help people feel more comfortable out in the field about, you know, what can we identify and what can't we identify, right? Because there's a lot of the birding world that you just kind of have to accept. I don't know what that call was, or I got a glimpse and love to call it that, but not certain that that's what it is.
Is the focus of the BioBlitz going to be on birds, or are you having experts in like other types of critters as well?
We're hoping to get a couple of entomologists or at least invertebrates,
Cool.
birds, general wildlife, and then botany, and then kind of a wetland generalist as well. So
Awesome.
yeah,
sounds
we're
fun.
hoping to get yeah, we're excited. And we're excited to actually reach out and try and find these people as well. So to kind of create like a contact base of people we can kind of pull from, you know, every now and then for events. So
Cool.
If you're ever fired up to do something like that at Tryon Creek, or if you've done something like that and you're going to do it again, let me know, because I do love, you know, I just think it's fun to have a focus and kind of a you know, an intense purpose for a day or a period of time, right? I mean,
Yeah,
my gosh.
we hopped on the City Nature Challenge last year at the very last minute and totally missed it this year. It's like a 3-day thing. It's happening right now where it's just like a global. I don't know. I think Johnson Creek are in on it this year again.
Okay.
But that was like the first and only community science thing we've done. But we might be doing crayfish surveys this summer, which
Oh,
would be an
nice.
Cool.
in-stream volunteer gig. Okay, so what about birders that are not early birds? What about, is dusk a good birding time? Any tips on specific habitats to target at dusk? Or is it
Yes,
not so much of a time?
yeah, no, dusk is absolutely a good birding time. So dawn and dusk are definitely those moments when I think it can be most powerful. But here's what I'll say is, again, it's back to habitat. Habitat is huge.
Yeah.
So there are certain habitats, you know, in an oak habitat, really once it warms up and the insects start moving, that can be the middle of the day, can be perfectly fine for birding. Dusk, you know, the challenge you'll run into with dusk, and it's one of the reasons I think that dawn is sort of preferential or early morning for birding, is you're gaining light. One of the most fascinating or one of the most frustrating things can be when you're birding at dusk and the light just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, you're trying to identify a bird and it's just virtually impossible.
Not happening.
Yeah. So, you know, I think there is probably a little bit of a skew to getting up early and watching. The other thing that's, you know, really worth it, even if you don't, and we're kind of getting to the edge of it now, but even if you don't know what you're listening to, is if you've never heard the dawn chorus, kick your butt, get up at 5:30 in the morning for 10 minutes, stick your head out the window and listen. And, you know, even if you just hear it, that dawn chorus in spring is quite remarkable. And it can be, you know, it can be devilishly challenging to figure out what you're listening to, for sure. But, you know, that's where these can come in. I was playing the other night, and the other thing to be open to is a dusk walk where it does actually get dark, but don't worry so much about looking, but worry about listening. And I have a recording on here, a couple recordings of one of a great horned owl and its fledge calling back to one another. It's at 2 in the morning. So I'm very grateful in that we have some forest right outside our window, and I was able to hear it through the window. Well, the window was open and I could hear it. And so I just put my phone up to the window at 2 a.m. and recorded this. It's kind of funny actually to hear the adults and then hear this young one trying to approximate the call. It doesn't quite get it. And then I have another one of recording of great horned owl and barred owls. Cool. And yeah, you can hear 2 different great horned owls calling, and then a pair of barred owls that are chatting it up. So, you know, owl detection, and you want to be super careful with, you know, some people will say, oh, go out and play the recording of the owl. I don't do that myself. Barred owls can be super aggressive. You can get a, you know, I'm not interested in talons to the skull. No, thank you. So, yeah. But yeah, you know, I would say really, and water birds, you know, ducks and things, that's one of the virtues, I guess, of going for water birds. There's a spot over in Beaverton that is probably one of the most birdie spots that I have ever encountered in an urban environment. It's just off Highway 217. It's not, you could walk to Washington Square Mall from it. And it's kind of an interesting spot because it's a Tualatin Nature Park. It's kind of an interesting spot, but they built a bunch of like office complexes right into it, and you know, the wetland is so close to these parking lots that the parking lots flood when the wetland really sees a lot of water. You know, half the parking spaces are filled with water. But it's trying to think of what the name of that is. Anyway, if you're interested, I could pull it up here for you.
Not the Commonwealth Park, is it?
No, I just recently did some birding there. It is along Fano Creek Park. My dog is deciding to give me a lot of vocalization. It is Greenway Park. Is that right? Yeah. Is that right? So it's Shoals Ferry. Where's Shoals Ferry?
Okay.
Hall Boulevard. And then you take, I remember it's called Nimbus. Take Greenway. Let me see if I can find it. Nimbus Drive. And you.
Okay, yeah, I see Nimbus Corporate Center.
Yes, yeah. And you go in there and nobody really cares if you park in their parking lot. Yeah, Greenway Park is right.
Oh yeah, that's like a pond right next to the building.
Yes, yeah, Cole Center Wetlands Park, I guess. Anyway, from there you can set up a spotting scope, and the wildlife there is rich, very diverse. And it's, you know, as you can see, it's a highly urbanized area, but it's a big wetland complex in there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, sure. I wonder if Derek ever stopped the recording.
Nope.
I don't think he did.
Looks like it's still going.
So our little chat is a part of the permanent record. Well, I can edit that.
I feel like that's fun though. That's okay.
Yeah. I suppose if someone's watching, they can always hit stop. So I'll hit stop share here. And well, and Alexander, thank you for hanging on. I hope you found our chat. I actually lost Derek and Willow entirely. So it's just the
yeah, Derek had to say goodnight to his kids.